need to project.
You did. You're good.
I started feeling more and more upset, and I think, and moved. And then without knowing why, I decided to read this particular thing that I'm going to read today, which is from the second chapter of the memoir that I'm working on. And I really did, it was all unconscious. I don't know why, I didn't know why I decided to read this. But yesterday, when I was on the train, I realized that I'm going to read this because my mother was herself an undergraduate at the University of Chicago. This is my mother. And, well, this was my mother. Or she still is my mother. She's not around anymore. But she was an undergraduate at the University of Chicago, as later I was a graduate student at the University of Chicago. And my mother left the University of Chicago 3 credits short of her degree. And the reason for that was that it was the 1930s, and my mother was a member of the Communist Party. And she was very active in the rights of what were then called Negroes, which the Communist Party was a big leader of. And this guy that was also in the party was arrested. They were picketing for rights, equal rights. And he was arrested, and she went to court to support him. And there was a reporter for the Chicago Tribune who was at this court hearing. And he published, she became the focus of the story, even though she was just a spectator, because my grandfather was a general in the U.S. Army. And they published the story, and he saw it, or someone pointed out to him. He came to Chicago immediately and yanked her out of school. So this is why she never finished. I was not really aware of this history in detail until I started working on the memoir. And I think it says something about my mother that the reporter said, if this is true, he said that she came to the trial in her mink coat. And this is my mother, and I thought, I just pulled these together at the last minute. I just like the pictures. And this is my mother at a later date with the Papillons that she read. I was already born by that time. And this is my mother when she became a very important person in the dog world, which is what I'm going to be talking about today. She became a judge and so on. So, as what's his name said, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And this is me about 10 years ago, maybe 7, 8 years ago, with my dog Presto. He had just gotten this title that had taken me forever to get. And as you can see, I'm very happy being here. And this is me, I think, last year. Still going, I'm 72, folks. Okay. This is me last year with my current agility dog, Vivace. And this is I don't know how to get back to it now. My mother's obituaries.
Oh, wait, don't we want to?
I don't know how to. I don't know why your Mac is different from my Mac. But
so many jokes could be said in response to that.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Because when you're talking about that apple, those apples do fall far from the tree.
That's, oh, you want to blow it up, yeah. Well, anyway, that's one of my mother's obituaries, and they obviously picked up that this was a very important thing about it. They didn't know about the mink code or anything. As children, we were excited to leave Manhattan, piling into my mother's tiny car to hold leashes and shove dog crates around at, for example, the outdoor Morrison Essex Dog Show in faraway New Jersey. Richard, a lonely neighborhood boy, also destined to be gay, had $1 rambunctious boxer. And I had Davy, the Shetland sheepdog, that was supposed to distract from the loss of my father. When Richard and I began showing our dogs in the new sport of obedience competition, and also in junior handling, where kids learn how to show off purebred dogs for their beauty, what is called typiness, we were becoming future dog people. Just having a dog doesn't make you part of the dog world. Most of the millions who have dogs are pet people, from the perspective of dog people. As my father was. Pet people may enjoy long walks with their dogs. They may even attend a couple of dog training classes, but they don't go any further. In the eyes of the average person, dog people are the ones who have gone too far, who have chosen to marry, let's not say their dogs, since dog people would not have sex with their dogs. It wouldn't be fair to the dogs. Rather, they marry their love of dogs, as my mother did. For gay people, breeders used to mean heterosexuals. That term's gone out for reasons that I don't need to explain. But for dog people, a breeder is someone who brings more purebred dogs into the world, especially if they enter dog shows hoping to put championships on their dogs and become known as top-notch to others in the know. Mercenaries who breed dogs purely for money or to supply pet shops with cute puppies bred in dubious or dirty conditions are not dog people. One's primary motive for breeding dogs has to be aesthetic and functional, to improve the breed. After the failure of her second marriage to my father Saul, this became my mother's ambition, her sole preoccupation. She would make her life in dogs. You might be thinking, how terrible. Mixed breeds are healthier, or the idea of purebred anything is repugnant, maybe even racist. Although dogs have been bred for specialized tasks, like retrieving, since our ancestors were hunters on foot, the idea of purity and closed breed registries derives not only from horse racing, but also from the 19th century social Darwinists who wanted to denigrate and keep out inferior races, immigrants like my father's Jewish people. Believe me, the contradictions don't escape me. They are as much a part of me as my mixed-up heritage. Whether or not this should be true, certainly nothing I would have consciously chosen, purebred dogs give me more pleasure than mixed-breed ones. My mother's passion for purebred dogs was her way of doing genetics, which is what she was studying at the University of Chicago. But her chosen dogs were also lady dogs that appeared in old and expensive paintings, dogs of the aristocracy who prided themselves on their own breeding. I don't need anyone to tell me that I, myself, am not purebred. Though my mother was descended exclusively from Northern Europeans, I have always been aware that Hitler and his blonde people would have sent me off to Auschwitz, and that conversely, I am not considered Jewish by Jewish law because my mother was not. Nevertheless, facts must be faced. The beauty of certain purebred dogs floors me. I am devastated, thrilled, as before the shape and movements of certain feminine women. After all the years spent lying and hoping that things would be otherwise with me than they are, I am no longer willing to equivocate. An apricot standard poodle was my consolation for turning 40. I was so upset about turning 40. And I decided to train her at an obedience school. It wasn't too long before a friend I made there had a litter of standard poodle pups and offered me one. I hesitated and agonized, knowing this was a life-changing decision. The dog trainer tried to convince me to take the pup. With 2 dogs, she said, you wouldn't be a pet person. You'd be a dog person. Just what I feared. To the adolescent me who had wanted to appear normal, Dogs of luck, you know. To my blonde suburban classmates, my mother and her dog friends were an embarrassment, eccentric and trivial, with their endless chit-chat about biased judges and promising male puppies whose testicles tragically were undescended. On a deeper level, that my mother had neglected me for the dogs, had slighted all other interests and obligations in pursuit of her obsession, had left me, her only child, angry and deprived. I had never blamed the dogs, though, only her. My friend with the poodle pups invited me to her apartment. Black, curly creatures like balletic sheep were lounging in artistic poses on every chair and sofa. They rose to check me out with their elegant muzzles and almond eyes, and I said to myself, I want dogs like that on my furniture. I want poodles, plural, to greet me at the door, their luxuriant curls like astrakhan under my fingers. I took the pup and became a poodle person, combining my father's breed of choice with my mother's avocation. My cell phone rings. It's my partner, Holly, asking, where's the dog eye medicine? I'm doing my civic duty, part of the juror pool of the State Supreme Court of New York. A peroxided woman my age, wearing a vivid orange leisure suit, queries, aren't you a poodle person? It turns out we trained dogs together some years ago, just after I took the second poodle. She has a Staffordshire Terrier. Immediately, we are temporary intimates in a mob of strangers. She relates how she and her husband rented a place in Florida, quote, with a backyard, just with a dog. You're a dog person, so you understand. I do. Her dog retrieved a ball in the yard twice the first day, and then ran back into the house and jumped on their bed. A city dog, she sighed without bitterness. They'd rather watch traffic. We go on the juror's lunch break with a third person who has no pets. The Staffordshire woman and I discuss our dogs, past and present, while the petless woman listens politely. The Staffordshire woman tries to make the petless woman understand. Like, I want to be able to take my dog everywhere. I want to be able to take her to my friends' houses. If you don't want me to bring my dog, I'll still be your friend, but, she laughs, we'll communicate on the telephone. In other words, being a dog person is more a matter of attitude than of dog ownership, which is only a necessary condition. Yes, the dog person probably collects dog tchotchkes like china figurines of her chosen breed, and covers up her breasts with dog t-shirts, showing, for instance, a person and several dogs in bed, never sleep alone again, and hats. Agility isn't a hobby, it's an addiction. But those are only symbols of the underlying fact that the dog person makes life decisions, paying more to rent a house with a backyard, getting over a devastating divorce, based on her love of dogs and involvement in dog-related activities. Being a dog person is an identity. For years, my mother read through the American Kennel Gazette, for which she wrote a monthly column, keeping up on genetic problems and big show wins in other breeds, and in other venues, dog venues, like tracking and herding. She trained many of her dogs in obedience, which had been our point of entry into dogdom back in the late 1940s. In 1992, though she was partially wheelchair-bound, I took her to England so she could fulfill her lifelong ambition to go there, meeting up with breeders she had known only by mail, and attending Crufts, the world's largest dog show, where we spent happy hours cruising the dogs, fingering leather leashes for sale, and watching the then new sport of agility, which is what I was doing in that slide. Virginia was a Papillon person, and eventually a preeminent breeder of them with a stock of 40 dogs. Paps are tiny, elegant lap dogs. Their name comes from the French for butterfly because of their spectacular cantilevered ears. I I grew up appreciating the importance of black ear fringes on a papillon, and knowing why the liver-colored papillons that foolish woman in Texas was breeding should be excluded from the gene pool. I went with my mother to so many of the national specialty shows where papillon people gather once a year that they all knew me, though I wasn't one of them. My mother joked that she never approved of my being a poodle person because poodle people were annoyingly snooty, so convinced that poodles were more intelligent and capable than other breeds. But she showed her appreciation of my pushing her wheelchair around England by offering to go with me to the poodle national specialty. At that time, I had not been to a poodle specialty. I wasn't that nutty. That would come later. For as my mother slipped and bumped her way toward death, the poodles became more and more precious to me, as if I could read my mother's mute love in their almond eyes. Probably a mediated, unspoken love was more comfortable to us both. Whatever else I was to my mother, I was not her confidant. Her decisions were never discussed with me, and in 1952, I only learned that we would leave New York, and my father, Saul, for California when all the plans had been made. Significant gestures infused with passions that had to be crudely interpreted because they were never explained, as if we were a deaf couple deprived even of sign language. Such was the stuff of our painfully intense mother-daughter life. Esther Mary, Richard Bauer, my childhood friend, said ominously, "Virginia's in big trouble." I had been worried about my mother for several years, before 1987, when Richard finally called to warn me. During my infrequent trips to California, where she lived, from New York, where I lived, in the 1980s, my mother had insisted on meeting me at restaurants. Then the telephone broke, and she refused to stare at or see me at all, communicating only by increasingly messed up letters. Her beloved IBM Selectric typewriter seemed to be gradually breaking down, leaving me anxiously out of touch. Richard, though, after a long career as a professional dog handler, mostly showing poodles, had become an outstanding dog show judge, so that he continued to move in the same doggy circles as my mother. Esther Mary, Richard used my childhood name. That dog that Virginia shipped to R was filthy and covered with fleas. R thinks that your mother is in trouble. You'd better look into it. Days later, defying her express orders to keep away, I showed up at my mother's front door, 7 miles up a eucalyptus-lined two-lane road in the hills above Stanford University. Neighbors I had hunted out by telephone had told me she had been seen wandering up and down the road, unkempt and smelly. So I was shocked, but not surprised, to find that my mother had, at the age of 75, become a bag lady with only a leaky roof over her head. The yard was littered with dog shit and rusty crates. The small wooden house had seen no upkeep or repair in years. She peered at me through the torn screen door. From inside the house, she refused to let me enter, while from inside came the frantic yapping of the trapped little dogs. At last, I was presented with a project that my personality had been formed in relation to: rescuing my mother. My mother's coloring was fair. She came from old Yankee stock. All her ancestors but one had come over before the Revolution, one of them on the Mayflower. We were descended, according to family lore, from Preserved White, the elder brother of Peregrine, who was the first white American-born baby. How could I feel connected to Preserved White? And why would I want to be? The Pilgrims were religious fanatics, except that our pasts must be owned. My mother's WASP ancestors and people like them conquered the country, cheated the Indians and then disowned them, kept African slaves, and they bravely crossed the Great Plains in covered wagons, freed slaves out of conviction, and gave birth in hard circumstances. Well, my mother always talked proudly about her ancestors and relatives. I knew I was different from these people we hardly ever saw. Within whiteness, there are subtleties and equivocations. Not all so-called white people are the same or equal. My fathers were all dark, and as luck would have it, I am too. At least I was. Though not as dark as they were. A mutt is what my students call us American mixed breeds. I think of my book self as bicultural and appreciate my hybrid vigor. Because of growing up in New York among my father's Jewish relatives, I'm at home among Jews, though ignorant of the religion. Because of being raised by my WASP mother, though, my sensibility is more akin to the WASPs I don't resemble. I came to understand that I wasn't as white as they were. My mother once corrected a hospital nurse who remarked on our resemblance as mother and daughter. My mother said, "But her father